Ambassador Kethvar walked through the massive crystal halls of Nexus Prime. His forearms moved nervously as he carried the datapad that had been keeping him awake for 3 days. The Galactic Council building was the biggest structure he had ever seen. Representatives from 847 different species came here to make decisions about the galaxy. Kethvar was young for a Zilani. At only 200 years old, he was considered barely an adult by his people's standards. This was his first time at the big council meeting that happened every 100 years. His green skin showed the stress patterns that all Zilani displayed when they were worried. The older members of his delegation had told him to stay quiet and learn, but Kethvar had found something in the old records that made no sense. He stopped at one of the viewing platforms that looked out over the council chamber. Below him, thousands of beings sat in their assigned sections. Some breathed oxygen like humans did. Others needed special atmosphere suits. A few floated in tanks of liquid. The diversity was amazing, but it also made everything complicated. Kethvar looked at his datapad again. Section 4, subsection 847 of the Galactic Peace Accords. Right there in the middle of boring trade regulations and shipping lane assignments was a single line that stood out like a bright star in empty space. Hostile action against human offspring is strictly prohibited under penalty of immediate council intervention. He had read it 50 times. No other species had anything like this written into galactic law. The Asthari, who had ruled parts of the galaxy for 50,000 years, had no special protections. The Vorthak, whose military might was legendary, had no mention of their children being off limits. Even the mysterious shadows who controlled trade routes across half the galaxy had nothing like this. Just the humans. And humans had only been part of the council for 300 years. They were practically newcomers. Kethvar's datapad chimed. The afternoon session was starting. He made his way down to the Zilani section and took his seat behind Elder Morvac, who was the head of their delegation. The old Zilani's skin showed the deep blue patterns that came with age and wisdom. Elder Morvac, Kethvar whispered, I need to ask about something in the peace accords. The elder's eyes stayed focused on the speaker's platform where a representative from the Kellan Republic was discussing mining rights. What is it, young one? Why do the humans have special protection for their children written into galactic law? Elder Morvac's skin went completely pale. The blue patterns faded to almost white. Around them, other members of nearby delegations turned to look. A Thraxian ambassador leaned closer with his insect-like head tilted. You should not ask such questions, Elder Morvac said quietly. But why not? I'm here to learn. This doesn't make sense. No other species has this kind of protection. The elder was quiet for a long moment. On the platform, the Kellan representative finished his speech and returned to his seat. The next speaker was announced, but Kethvar noticed that conversations were starting in many sections of the chamber. Word was spreading about his question. Some knowledge comes with a price, young Kethvar, Elder Morvac finally said. Some rules exist because the alternative is unthinkable. What alternative? They're just humans. They're not even that strong physically. Most of them can't live more than 100 years. Their technology is good, but not the best in the galaxy. Why are their children so special? Elder Morvac stood up suddenly. His skin was now showing the deep red patterns that meant serious alarm. We will discuss this later, in private. But it was too late. Kethvar's questions had been heard by others. A representative from the ancient Asthari delegation was walking over. Her people looked almost like humans, but taller and thinner, with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own light. She was old even by Astari standards, and her presence made other beings step back respectfully. Young Zilani, she said in a voice that sounded like music played on crystal. You ask dangerous questions. I'm sorry, Elder. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just want to understand. The Asthari elder looked around the chamber. Many conversations had stopped. Representatives were watching their interaction. Walk with me, she said. Kethvar followed her away from the main chamber, to a smaller room that looked out over the crystal gardens of Nexus Prime. The room was empty except for them. My name is Lyrale. I have been alive for 12,000 years. I was here when the humans first applied to join the Council. I was here when that protection clause was written into law. Do you know what we call the humans in the old language? No. Elder. The inheritors. Not because they inherited their world, but because they inherited something else. Something that makes them different from every other species in the galaxy. Kethvar waited. He could sense that this was important. The humans look peaceful, young one. They seem weak compared to many species. They have short lives and soft bodies. But there is something sleeping inside them. Something that their ancestors passed down from the early days of their world. Most of the time, this sleeping thing stays quiet. The humans are gentle. They make art and music. They laugh and love and dream. Lirelei moved to the window and looked out at the gardens. But when their children are threatened, that sleeping thing wakes up. And when it wakes up, young Zalani, the humans become something else entirely. Something that even the oldest races learned to fear. What do you mean? 350 years ago, before the humans joined the Council, there was an incident. A species called the Devourers attacked a human colony world. They took human children as slaves. The humans asked the Council for help. We said, it was not our problem. Lyralei's silver skin seemed to dim. Within 6 months, the Devourer species no longer existed. Not just their military, not just their government, their entire species. Gone. The humans had weapons we had never seen. Technology that bent the laws of physics. They moved through space like ghosts and struck like lightning. Kethvar felt cold despite the warm air in the room. When it was over, the human delegation came to the Council. They offered to join us in peace. They said they would share their knowledge and follow our laws. But they asked for one thing in return. One simple rule that would be written into galactic law forever. The Protection Clause. Yes, and every elder race in the Council agreed, immediately. Because we understood something that you are just learning now, young Kethvar. That clause wasn't written to protect human children from the galaxy. It was written to protect the galaxy from what humans become when their children are threatened. The room was silent except for the soft sound of alien wind through the crystal trees outside. So we made a rule, Lyrelei continued. The first rule of the galaxy, even though it's buried in legal text where most beings never see it, don't attack the human children. Never. Not for any reason. Because the price of breaking that rule is something no species wants to pay. Kethvar looked at his datapad again. The simple line of text seemed different now. More important. More frightening. Are they really that dangerous? Lyrelei smiled, but it was not a happy expression. The humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, young one. The fact that they choose not to be is the only reason the rest of us can sleep safely at night. 6 months after his conversation with Elder Lyrelei, Kethvar sat in the council chamber watching the most important vote in galactic history. The tensions that had been building for years were finally coming to a head. The human delegation had been pushing for more representation in the council. They wanted voting rights equal to their population and economic contribution to the galaxy. The older species did not like this idea. War Prime Thaklan of the Krex Empire stood at the speaker's platform. His massive frame filled the space, all 8 feet of armored hide and battle scars. The Krex were one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of systems before joining the Council 3,000 years ago. The Qual, humans grow too bold. Thaklan's voice boomed across the chamber. His translator made his words sound harsh and angry. They demand more power after only 300 years among us. They forget their place. Murmurs of agreement came from several sections. The Vorthak delegation nodded their massive heads. The Shadow Collective's representatives whispered among themselves in their dark corner of the chamber. Kethvar noticed that the human delegation was not present. Ambassador Sarah Chen and her team had left 2 days ago for a diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim. The timing seemed suspicious now. Furthermore, Thaklan continued, the humans enjoy privileges that no other species possesses. This protection clause for their offspring is an insult to galactic sovereignty. No single species should enjoy such special treatment. Elder Morvac leaned over to Kethvar. This is not good. The War Prime plans something. But Elder Lyrelai told me why that rule exists. Surely the other elder races will stop this. Look around, young one. How many of the truly old races are here today? Kethvar scanned the chamber. The Asthari section was nearly empty. Only a few junior representatives sat where dozens should be. The ancient crystalline minds had sent no one at all. The eternal watchers, who usually observed every major vote, were absent. Where are they? The wise ones have made themselves scarce. They remember what I remember, what you learned 6 months ago. But the younger races, the ones who have only heard stories, they see an opportunity. War Prime Thaklon raised his massive fist. I call for a vote to remove the special protections granted to human offspring. Let them stand equal with all other species under galactic law. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered, others remained silent. Kethvar saw fear on many faces, but also greed and ambition on others. The voting began immediately. Each species delegation cast their vote through the quantum communication system. The tally appeared on the massive display screens throughout the chamber. The numbers climbed slowly. 423 votes to remove the protection. 421 votes to keep it. 3 abstentions. The protection clause was repealed. Thaklon's roar of triumph echoed through the crystal halls. The humans will learn that they are not special. They are not untouchable. Today the galaxy takes back its dignity. Kethvar felt sick. Around him, Elder Morvac and the other older Zilani looked like they had seen their own deaths. Within hours, everything changed. The first sign was the movement of ships. Krek's battle fleets that had been stationed near their home territories suddenly jumped to hyperspace. They were not alone. Ships from a dozen species that had voted to remove the protection began moving toward human space. Kethvar was in his quarters on Nexus Prime when the emergency alerts began. His communication device showed priority messages from across the galaxy. Human colony worlds were reporting incoming fleets. Military forces were taking positions around 7 different human systems. He rushed to the Council Communication Center, where beings from many species were gathered around the main display screens. Real-time feeds showed Krek's warships emerging from hyperspace around a world called Haven's Rest. "What are they doing?" someone asked. A Krek's junior officer who worked in the communications center answered with obvious pride. War Prime Thaklon has declared that human terrorist cells threaten galactic peace. Our fleets will suppress these threats and show the humans their proper place. The feeds showed massive warships positioning themselves in orbit around the peaceful colony world. Haven's Rest was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most beautiful human settlements. It was home to farmers, artists, and teachers. There were no military installations there. Kethvar watched in growing horror as targeting systems locked onto the planet's surface. The Krek ships were not aiming at government buildings or spaceports. They were targeting schools, hospitals, and residential areas. "They wouldn't," he whispered. Elder Morvac appeared beside him. The old Zilani's skin showed the deepest red patterns Kethvar had ever seen. "They will. They want to send a message. They want to show that human children are not protected anymore." On the screen, the first orbital bombardment began. The energy beam struck Haven's Rest Elementary School during the lunch hour. The building simply disappeared in a flash of superheated plasma. 847 children were vaporized instantly. 12-year-old Maya Chen, who had been eating a sandwich her mother packed that morning, was gone before she could even understand what was happening. The communication center fell silent. Even the Krek's officer looked shocked at what they had just witnessed. More beams struck the planet. Hospitals, schools, playgrounds, anywhere children might be found. The message was clear. The protection was gone. Human children were no longer safe. The feeds continued for 20 minutes. When it was over, Haven's Rest looked like a dead world. Smoke rose from 100 impact sites. The beautiful forests were burning. The crystal lakes had been turned to steam. Then the feeds cut out. Every communication channel from human space went dark. The quantum networks that connected human worlds to the galactic communication grid simply stopped working. "What's happening?" Voices called out across the communication center. "The humans have cut themselves off," Elder Morvac said quietly. "They are no longer talking to us." Kethavar stared at the blank screens. "What does that mean?" "It means they are deciding what to do next. And young one, based on what I know of human history, that should terrify every being in this galaxy." In the silence of the communication center, with the acrid smell of fear filling the air from dozens of different species, Kethavar finally understood what Elder Lyrelai had been trying to tell him. The protection clause had never been about keeping human children safe. It had been about keeping the sleeping thing inside humanity from waking up. And now that thing was stirring. On the screens, automated messages began appearing from human space. They were simple and identical across all channels. 3 words in the common galactic language. "Children are sacred." The messages repeated every few seconds. Nothing else. No demands, no threats, no negotiations. Just those 3 words. Over and over again. War Prime Thaklon's victory celebration was just beginning in the Krek section of Nexus Prime. But Kethavar noticed that none of the elder races were celebrating with them. In fact, most of the truly ancient beings had already left the station entirely. The smart ones were running. The question was whether they were running far enough or fast enough to escape what was coming next. In the depths of space, in systems that most galactic maps marked as empty, ancient human defense stations began powering up for the first time in 3 centuries. Weapons that bent the laws of physics hummed to life. Ships that moved like shadows between the stars started there. Engines, humanity was no longer hiding what it truly was. Admiral Sarah Cross stood in the command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha. The massive orbital platform hung above Earth like a metal moon. She had been in a meeting about trade agreements when the emergency message came through. Now she watched the footage from Haven's Rest for the 3rd time. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not break. Her aide noticed that she had become completely still, like a statue made of flesh and bone. "Ma'am?" Lieutenant Commander Hayes asked quietly. "Your orders?" Admiral Cross was silent for a long moment. On the screen, the smoking ruins of Haven's Rest Elementary School showed where 847 children had died. She could see the playground equipment melted into twisted metal, the little swings where children had laughed just hours before. "Activate the Lazarus Protocol," she said. Lieutenant Commander Hayes went pale. "Ma'am, are you certain? That protocol hasn't been used since the Centauri Wars 300 years ago." "I'm certain. Ma'am, the Lazarus Protocol requires authorization from the civilian government." Admiral Cross turned to look at him. Her eyes were completely calm. "The civilian government no longer exists, Lieutenant Commander. As of 23 minutes ago, Earth declared martial law. I am now the highest authority in human space." Hayes's hands trembled as he entered the activation codes. Across Earth, similar scenes were happening in military installations, research stations, and government buildings. The Lazarus Protocol was humanity's most secret contingency plan. It had been designed for only one purpose: total war against an enemy that threatened human survival. The first quantum encrypted message went out to every human colony, every ship, every outpost in known space. The message was simple: the children are gone. Lazarus is active. God help us all. Within hours, something changed across human space. Citizens who had been teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, artists, and musicians suddenly began moving with unified purpose. They walked to storage facilities that most people didn't know existed. They opened sealed containers that had been waiting for centuries. On the agricultural world of New Kansas, Farmer John Peterson left his wheat fields and walked to a hidden bunker beneath his barn. Inside were blueprints for weapons that could crack planets in half. Peterson had been an engineer before he became a farmer. Now he remembered why he had really chosen to live on this quiet world. On the artist colony of Serenity, painter Maria Santos put down her brushes and opened a workshop that had been sealed since her grandmother's time. The equipment inside could build machines that folded space and time like paper. Maria's family had been weapons designers for 5 generations before choosing peace. On New Tokyo, Chef Hiroshi Tanaka closed his restaurant and walked to the basement, where his great-grandfather's research notes were stored. The old man had been one of the scientists who designed humanity's most terrible weapons before the species chose to hide their true nature. All across human space, the pattern repeated. Peaceful civilians revealed themselves to be sleeping weapons, makers, retired soldiers, hidden engineers, and camouflaged scientists. The humans had not given up their violent past when they joined the galactic community. They had simply buried it very deep and hoped they would never need it again. Now they needed it. Reports began flooding into the Galactic Council from intelligence services across the galaxy. The humans were building things, big things, strange things. Devices that made the sensors of passing ships go crazy with readings that violated known physics. On Nexus Prime, Kethvar sat in the intelligence briefing room with representatives from dozens of species. The reports made no sense. The humans have constructed a ring of objects around the Krex home system, reported a Vorthak intelligence officer. Each object is approximately the size of a small moon. They appeared overnight. Our sensors cannot determine what they are. Similar constructions have appeared around every system whose species voted to remove the protection clause, added a Zalani analyst. The humans somehow transported these massive devices across the galaxy without anyone detecting them. Elder Morvac looked at the holographic displays showing the mysterious objects. How is this possible? Moving objects that large should take months, even years. Our scientists believe the humans possess technology that allows them to fold space, the Vorthak officer continued. The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. Kethvar studied the images. The objects looked like geometric sculptures made of dark metal and crystal. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. What do they do? We don't know. They're just sitting there, waiting. In the Krex home system, War Prime Thaklon stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the objects surrounding his son. His military advisors had been arguing for hours about what to do. They're just sitting there, his weapons officer reported. No movement, no communications, no hostile actions. What are the energy readings? Unknown, War Prime. Our sensors detect massive power sources, but the technology is unlike anything in our databases. Thaklon's pride would not let him show fear, but he was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had built these objects and moved them into position around his system without anyone detecting them. That level of technology should have been impossible. Send a message to the human fleet, he ordered. Demand that they remove these objects immediately. The message was transmitted. The response came back within minutes. War Prime Thaklon of the Krex Empire. You have killed our children. You have broken the one rule that kept you safe. We offer you one chance. Surrender yourself and all others responsible for the Haven's Rest massacre. Disband your fleets. Submit to human authority. Or learn why your ancestors were wise enough to fear us. The message was signed by Admiral Sarah Cross, Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces. Thaklon roared in anger. Submit to human authority? They dare make demands of the Krex Empire? War Prime, his science officer said quietly. The energy readings from those objects are increasing. On the main screen, the objects around the Krex sun began to glow. Not with light, but with something that made space itself seem to bend and twist around them. What are they doing? Unknown, sir. But whatever it is, it's generating more power than our entire fleet combined. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in the command centers of every species that had voted against the humans. The mysterious objects had appeared around their home systems as well. All of them were beginning to glow with the same impossible energy. In the briefing room on Nexus Prime, new reports were coming in every few minutes. The objects around the Vorthak system have begun some kind of process, an intelligence officer announced. Their sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions. Same reports from the Shadow Collective territories, another officer added. The objects appear to be affecting local spacetime. Elder Morvac stood slowly. His skin showed the deep red patterns of extreme fear. I know what they're doing. What? Kethvar asked. They're not weapons in the traditional sense. They're something worse. The humans have built devices that can unmake matter itself, convert it directly to pure energy. The room fell silent. You mean they can destroy planets? No, young Kethvar. They can do something far more terrifying. They can make planets simply stop existing, along with everything and everyone on them. As if to confirm his words, a priority message came through from the outer rim. The outermost planet in the Krex system had vanished, not destroyed, not broken apart, simply gone, as if it had never existed at all. In its place was empty space and a growing field of energy that made the nearby objects glow even brighter. The humans were not interested in conquest or territory. They were offering a choice: surrender completely or be systematically erased from existence. War Prime Thaklon stared at the empty space where one of his worlds used to be. 8 billion Krex had lived on that planet. Now there was nothing but energy and expanding emptiness. His communications officer's voice was barely a whisper. War Prime, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our colony worlds. They want to submit to the humans before... Before what? Before... They disappeared too, sir. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was hungry for justice. The surrender message came 3 hours after the third Krex planet disappeared. War Prime Thaklon sat in his command chair watching the empty spaces where 3 of his worlds used to exist. 24 billion Krex citizens had simply vanished. Not killed, not captured, erased from reality as if they had never been born. His communications officer approached with trembling hands. War Prime, Admiral Cross is requesting to speak with you directly. The main screen flickered to life. Admiral Sarah Cross appeared, sitting in what looked like a simple office. Behind her was a window showing Earth's blue skies and white clouds. She looked completely calm, like someone discussing the weather. War Prime Thaklon, she said in a quiet voice. You have 12 hours to surrender yourself and every officer who participated in the Haven's Rest attack. You will also order the complete disbanding of your military forces. And if I refuse? Thaklon tried to sound strong, but his voice cracked. Then tomorrow we will erase your homeworld. The day after that we will erase the next planet. We will continue until your entire species exists only as a memory. You cannot do this. The Galactic Council will stop you. Admiral Cross smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Galactic Council voted to remove our children's protection. The Galactic Council watched while you murdered 847 innocent children. The Galactic Council is now irrelevant. The screen went dark. Thaklon looked around. His bridge. His officers were all staring at him. Some were crying, others looked angry, all of them looked terrified. What are your orders, War Prime? His weapons officer asked. Before Thaklon could answer, his science officer spoke up. Sir, I'm detecting movement around our home world. On the tactical display, dozens of new objects appeared around Krex Prime. They were smaller than the planet killer devices, but they were moving. Fast. What are those? Unknown, sir. They appear to be ships, but they're not showing up properly on our sensors. It's like they're only partially here. How many ships? I count at least 200, but the readings keep changing. They seem to be phasing in and out of normal space. Thaklon realized that the humans were not just threatening his people. They were showing off, demonstrating technology that made the Krex Empire's most advanced weapons look like stone tools. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The Vorthak supremacy watched as human ships appeared inside their most heavily defended systems. The Shadow Collective found their secret bases surrounded by vessels that moved through solid matter. The hegemony of Zeta discovered that their supposedly invisible fleet was being tracked by sensors they couldn't even detect. On Nexus Prime, the emergency council session was chaos. Representatives were shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Some species were demanding immediate action against the humans. Others were calling for surrender. Kethvar sat with Elder Morvac in the Zelani section, watching the madness unfold. The display screen showed real-time updates from across the galaxy. Human forces were everywhere, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. How did they do this so quickly? Kethvar asked. They were always capable of this, Elder Morvac replied. They simply chose not to use these abilities. Now they have no choice. A new report came in from the Vorthok territories. 3 more planets had vanished in their system. The pattern was always the same. The outer worlds first, working inward toward the populated core worlds. They're giving everyone time to think, Elder Morvac observed. Time to understand what will happen if they don't surrender. Kethvar watched the tactical displays. Why? Don't they just destroy the military fleets? Why erase entire planets? Because this isn't about defeating armies, young one. This is about making sure this never happens again. The humans are teaching the galaxy a lesson that will be remembered for 1,000 generations. In the Shadow Collective territories, something else was happening. The humans had found the secret slave markets where captured beings from dozens of species were bought and sold. The slavers' ships were simply disappearing. No explosions. No wreckage. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. But the slaves were appearing on human ships, unharmed and free. A message began broadcasting on all frequencies across the galaxy. It was Admiral Cross again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from every major human colony. Teachers, farmers, artists, and workers. They all had the same expression of quiet determination. To all species of the galaxy, Admiral Cross began. We did not want this war. We joined the galactic community in peace. We followed your laws. We shared our knowledge and our friendship. You repaid us by voting to make our children fair targets. You repaid us by murdering innocents to send a message. Now we send our own message. The screen changed to show the human devices around various star systems. They were all glowing brighter now. We have the power to erase your civilizations, completely. We can make you disappear from history itself, but we are not monsters. We are giving you one last chance. Every species that voted to remove our children's protection has 72 hours to surrender completely. Disband your military forces. Turn over all government authority to human administrators. Submit to our rule. Those who surrender will be treated fairly. Your people will be protected. Your cultures will be preserved. You will live under human law, but you will live. Those who refuse will simply stop existing. The message ended. In the Krek system, War Prime Thaklan faced the hardest decision of his life. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Outside, human ships moved through space like living shadows. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, we're receiving surrender messages from 47 of our colony worlds. They're not waiting for your decision. Thaklan looked at the tactical display. Another planet had vanished while he watched. His people were running out of time. On Nexus Prime, the panic was spreading. Representatives from the species that had voted against the humans were trying to contact their homeworlds. Many were getting no response. The communications networks in those systems were either jammed or destroyed. Elder Lyrelai appeared in the council chamber. The ancient Asthari moved slowly to the center of the room. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast space. I warned you, she said simply. I told you what would happen if you woke the sleeping dragon. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn what the rest of us learned long ago. The humans are not just another species. They are something unique. In the galaxy, when they choose peace, they are the gentlest beings alive. When they choose war, they become death itself. She looked around the chamber at the terrified faces. The age of the old council is over. The age of human rule has begun. Those wise enough to surrender quickly will find them to be fair masters. Those foolish enough to resist will find them to be perfect executioners. War Prime Thaklan made his choice. He activated his personal communicator and sent a message to every Krek ship in the galaxy. All Krek's forces, this is War Prime Thaklan. I order the immediate surrender of all military units to human command. Effective immediately. The Krek's empire submits to human authority. He looked around his bridge one last time. "I'm sorry," he said to his officers. "I'm sorry I brought this on our people." Outside, the human ship stopped moving. The planet killer devices stopped glowing. The systematic erasure of the Krex system came to an end, but the damage was already done. Half the Krex empire was simply gone. Billions of people had been erased from existence to teach the galaxy a single lesson. The humans were no longer hiding what they really were, and what they really were was terrifying. The war lasted 17 hours and 36 minutes. When it was over, the galaxy was a very different place. Kethvar stood on the observation deck of what used to be called Nexus Prime. Now it was known as Administrative Station Alpha, the EQ, regional headquarters for the Terran Protectorate. 3 months had passed since the surrender, and he was still trying to understand what had happened to the galaxy he thought he knew. The Galactic Council building had been transformed. Where, once hundreds of species had argued and debated as equals, now there was a single human administrator making decisions with quiet efficiency. The massive chamber that used to hold thousands of representatives was now a memorial hall dedicated to the children who died on Haven's Rest. Kethvar walked through the memorial hall every day. 847 holographic statues showed the faces of the children who had been killed. In the center stood a larger statue of a 12-year-old girl with a bright smile. Maya Chen, the girl whose death had changed everything. Fresh flowers appeared at the base of her statue every morning. They came from beings across the galaxy, former enemies who now lived under human protection. All of them had learned the same lesson: never threaten human children. "You come here often," said a voice behind him. Kethvar turned to see Elder Lyrelai approaching. The ancient Asthari looked older now, though she claimed to be relieved that the long wait was finally over. "I still don't understand how it happened so fast," Kethvar said. "The humans never intended to conquer the galaxy piece by piece," Lyrelai explained. "They planned for total victory from the beginning. When they activated their Lazarus protocol, they revealed weapons and technologies they had kept hidden for centuries." She gestured to the memorial statues around them. But their most powerful weapon was not technology. It was the willingness to use that technology without hesitation or mercy when their children were threatened. Kethvar looked at Maya Chen's statue. "What happened to War Prime Thaclon?" "He was executed on Haven's Rest 6 weeks ago. The trial lasted 5 minutes. The humans broadcast it across the galaxy so everyone could see what happens to those who hurt their children. The execution had been simple and quick. Thaclon had been given a chance to speak. He had apologized to the families of the children he had killed. Then Admiral Cross had personally fired the weapon that ended his life. No ceremony, no speeches, just justice. The other species that voted against the protection clause? All under human administration now. Their governments were dissolved. Their military forces disbanded. Their people are learning to live under human law." Kethvar walked over to a window that looked out over the station. He could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. Trade was flowing again. Commerce was returning to normal. But everything was different now. "Are we prisoners?" Lyrelai smiled sadly. "That depends on how you define freedom, young one. The humans control all major decisions. They make the laws. They enforce the peace. But they also protect us from threats. We cannot handle ourselves. They feed worlds that cannot feed themselves. They provide medical care to species that lack the technology." She paused. The old council talked about cooperation while species enslaved each other, started wars, and committed genocide. The humans simply ended all of that. Permanently. Through the window, Kethvar could see a human patrol ship escorting a convoy of refugee vessels. The refugees were survivors from the former Shadow Collective territories, where the humans had shut down the slave markets and freed millions of captives. What about species that resist? There are no species that resist anymore. The last holdouts surrendered 2 weeks ago when they realized the humans were serious about erasing entire civilizations. Kethvar thought about the reports he had read. 3 species had chosen total resistance rather than surrender. They no longer existed. Not conquered, not enslaved, simply removed from the galaxy, as if they had never been born. "Do you think they're evil?" Lyrelai considered the question for a long moment. I think they are what they have always been. Protectors. The difference is that now they protect the entire galaxy instead of just their own children. By force. Yes. By overwhelming, absolute force that makes resistance impossible. They walked together toward the administrative offices where Kethavar worked now. The humans had kept many of the existing bureaucrats and diplomats. They needed people who understood the complex relationships between different species. But the final authority always rested with human administrators. Kethavar's new job was helping resettle refugees and coordinating aid shipments to worlds damaged by the brief war. The work was satisfying in ways his old council duties had never been. Problems actually got solved now instead of being debated endlessly. Administrator Chen wants to see you, Lyrelai said as they reached the office complex. Administrator Sarah Chen was the daughter of the ambassador who had been away during the crucial vote. She was also the niece of Maya Chen, the little girl whose death had started everything. She ran the civilian administration of what used to be council space with the same quiet efficiency her aunt had shown as a diplomat. Kethavar found her in her office, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. She looked up when he entered and gestured for him to sit. The resettlement program for the former Krex territories is ahead of schedule, she said. Your coordination work has been excellent. Thank you, Administrator. I have a new assignment for you. We're establishing a new memorial on Haven's Rest. We want you to oversee the project. Kethavar felt honored and terrified at the same time. Haven's Rest was sacred ground to the humans now. The entire planet had been turned into a memorial park, dedicated to the children who died there. What kind of memorial? A museum. We want to tell the story of what happened here. Not just the attack, but everything that led up to it. The old council, the vote, the consequences. She handed him a data pad with the preliminary plans. We want future generations to understand why the first rule of the galaxy existed, and why breaking it led to the end of the old order. Kethavar studied the plans. The museum would be built on the exact site where Haven's Rest Elementary School had stood. Visitors would walk through exhibits showing the history of human integration into galactic society. They would see the peaceful years, the cooperation, the friendship, and then they would see what happened when that peace was shattered. Why me? Because you asked the right question 6 months ago. You wanted to know why human children were protected. Now you understand the answer better than most. Administrator Chen stood and walked to her window. Outside, construction crews were building new housing for the refugees streaming in from former war zones. Humans and aliens worked side by side, creating something better from the ruins of the old galaxy. The memorial will have one central message, she continued. The same message that was written into the original protection clause. Some rules exist not to limit freedom, but to prevent consequences that no one wants to face. Children are sacred, Kethavar said, remembering the automated messages that had played after the attack. All children, not just human children. That's the new rule. Any species that threatens children anywhere in the galaxy will face the same fate as the Krex Empire. She turned back to face him. We learned something in the war, Kethavar. We learned that when humans are truly angry, they don't just win battles. They reshape reality itself. The old galaxy is gone. The new galaxy belongs to humanity. But the new galaxy is also safer, more just, and more peaceful than the old one ever was. Kethavar left the meeting with a new understanding of his place in the universe. He was no longer a representative of an independent species negotiating with equals. He was a protected citizen of the Terran Protectorate, living under the absolute authority of beings who had proven they could erase entire civilizations without hesitation. But he was also safer than he had ever been in his life. Crime had virtually disappeared. Wars were impossible. Slavery was extinct. Starvation and disease were being eliminated world by world. The humans had not conquered the galaxy out of greed or ambition. They had conquered it out of love. Love for their children, and by extension, love for all children everywhere. As he walked back through the memorial hall, Kethavar stopped again at Maya Chen's statue. The little girl's stone face smiled down at him with innocent joy. Thank you, he whispered. The girl had died so that the galaxy could learn what happened when you threatened the most precious thing in the universe. Her death had ended an age of chaotic freedom and begun an age of enforced peace. Looking around at the memorials, to all the children who had died, Kethavar understood the final truth about humanity. They were not conquerors or tyrants, they were parents. And parents, when their children are threatened, will burn down the entire universe to keep them safe. The first rule of the galaxy was simple. Children are sacred. Everyone in the universe now understood that rule was enforced by beings who could reshape reality itself to protect the innocent. And no one would ever be foolish enough to test that rule again.